we started out talking about information that most artists don't get in school. And we were talking about how to get in the gallery. And right. You're like the guy to see about that. So thank you for
Now that I don't have a gallery yet, it's better because then I don't have to worry about it.
Oh, yeah, because you can just tell me like
exactly.
It is.
Exactly. My main concern is, for most schools, if you're going for a profession, if it's being a doctor or a lawyer or any of those things, they talk to them about how they get paid, how they set up a practice, all those important things. No one ever does that for artists. They get critiqued. They usually are with artists, many of whom may not even have a gallery they're teaching them. Often many of them do, especially at U of H. Most of the people that are teaching there have gallery representation, but I don't think they ever really talk about that to their students, particularly to their graduate students. And it's a rough world out there for artists, and we're turning them out. We're just churning out artists, and the system really can't absorb them all. And I think everybody should be aware of that. If you're taking accounting, you have a pretty good shot of getting a job as an accountant or setting up your own accounting practice. But as an artist, it's a much tougher road to hoe. And so I think two things are really important. One of them is for an artist to know where they are in their career, what body of work they have to present to somebody if they're going to try to get into a gallery, or if a curator is going to make a studio visit. How far along are you when you ask someone like a curator to come, or when you approach a dealer and say, I've got a body of work that I could right now put on the walls for you to sell, or I right now could have an exhibition, a one-person exhibition, or I'm set up to be part of a group show. I have enough work. And I think that takes a little soul searching, and also to have other people that you respect look at your work and say, I don't think you're ready yet, or wow, I think you ought to show this to somebody. The next thing to do is, if you're going to do a gallery, do your homework. I mean, for God's sake. When I had a gallery, I would have people walk in the front door, walk straight into my office and say, I'd like to show you my work. And I'd say, well, really it's better if you make an appointment with me and we can set up a time, because right now I'm in the middle of something, or I'm about to install a show, or whatever. In New York, many of the galleries in New York, at least this is when I was dealing with a gallery in New York, they said, bring your work in on Friday or the first Monday of the month, and we'll return it to you on the second Monday. This is back when we had slides. Mm-hmm. Now it's a very different thing. When artists call galleries now, quite often they say, do you have the gallery will say, do you have a website? Fine. Let me look at the website. If I'm interested, I'll get back with you. And that saves all this running around and dealing with that effort. But I think you need to go into galleries and see what they show, and do it over a period of time. We always talk about a gallery's program. Well, I don't think all galleries have a set program, but oftentimes a gallery focuses on a certain kind of art. Whether it's minimalist art, whether it's color field, whether it's representational art, whether it's photography, whether it's works on paper, whether it's large-scale paintings because they can handle large-scale paintings. Oftentimes they want younger artists, sometimes they don't want younger artists. They want somebody with an established reputation. Then they don't have to work so hard. And you have to be concerned about, if you're going to look at a gallery in Houston, you better find out if that same gallery has exclusive rights for the state of Texas, or exclusive rights overall, or whether if you want to get another gallery in Dallas or San Antonio or Austin, the only possibilities other than Houston, then you have to find out if they're exclusive only to Houston. And you could then go find somebody in Dallas, or at least go around to the galleries and see where you think you fit in. Now, it doesn't mean that they'll agree with you, because oftentimes you think you'll fit in a lot of places and they'll say, well, that isn't what we're looking for. Most galleries are not actively looking for artists, especially established galleries. So you're better off to target younger galleries that are more on the beginning stages of forming their gallery, or galleries that you know have lost some artists and might be willing to look for replacements. Because artists die off or they move away, and it happens with almost every gallery. But I think that's the most important thing, so that then when you approach a gallery, you have at least an opportunity of saying, I've been to your gallery, I've looked at your website, I think I might be a fit for you.
Yes.
So I at least would hope that you might look at my website. And I think that is crucial to every artist who's seriously functioning as an artist, to have a website. And it needs to be a good and accessible website. It needs to be user-friendly, where you can say, paintings or works on paper or recent work or earlier work, and it's very clear that there's this body of work, this body of work, this body of work, there's this kind of work, this kind of work, this kind of work. And then I think it's very easy for someone. I know as a curator, I never had that opportunity because nobody had websites. So I'd have to go to galleries, or I'd have to find somebody and make a studio visit. And now it's made that much easier. But on the other hand, it also makes it much easier to say no, because you're not really in a face-to-face situation. You're not having to be polite and nice to somebody. You just say, I've looked at your website and I don't think you're a fit.
Yeah.
Or what I know from gallery friends of mine, and I'm sitting in a gallery right now, they normally will say, what is your website? Send me an email with your website on it. If I'm interested, I'll get back to you. So it leaves them the opportunity of doing it or not, but probably if they've said it, they will. Or they wouldn't ask you to stay in contact.
Another way I found getting into a gallery, because I didn't get into a gallery till I was 44 years old.
Exactly.
But I had a lot of shows under my belt.
Sure.
And is to participate in group shows and competitions within the city you're living in.
Yes.
Or the state you're living in.
Or in some cases, even outside of. There's a great publication called New American Painting.
Yes.
And they do juried exhibitions where they bring a curator in. They have an editor, and they hire curators, and there are submissions made, and the curator selects, and then the editor usually selects somebody within that group as a pick, and they do a very nice, thick catalog, and they do it regionally. So I think Texas falls in the Southwest, I think. And they do that, I think it rotates pretty much
every
quarterly.
3 months.
Yeah. So I think Texas maybe once every 2 years that Texas is in there, or the region that Texas is in is there. But in the beginning, it was mostly just artists who didn't have representation. Now galleries encourage their artists to enter it, and there are people with stellar reputations who are getting into this New American Painting competition and getting a lot of attention and getting other galleries because of it. If they have a gallery, they list their gallery affiliation. If they don't, then galleries that are looking can say, I'm going to snap this person up right now. And that's a very good one. Unfortunately, there aren't a lot of juried competitions that are statewide that I'm aware of in Texas. The big show at Lawndale is going through some permutations. I'm not sure. It used to always be at the same time. It was always the same process. But that has traditionally been a good place for people to show their work if they get into the exhibition. There are other smaller, there was also, I think Stephen F. Austin usually gets a really prominent juror, well-known nationally sometimes, and certainly regionally in other cases, juror to jury in exhibition. That it's a submission thing, and they're not only from Texas, but it's a fairly broad exhibition. Amarillo used to have a competition, but they haven't in the past few years, and they were doing it by category. They were doing photography, they were doing, I think, ceramics, they were doing drawing, and they were doing painting, and it rotated. And I haven't seen a call for that in a long time. I'm not sure, but I think Glass Tire lists some of these kind of competitions. There used to be a couple of publications that would list them, but I'm not sure there are anymore. And that's because I just haven't been following that.
Yeah, I haven't, because I'm in the gallery and people invite me now.
Right.
I don't do much in the competitions, but getting into competitions was one of the reasons Anya said, yeah, I want her. And it wasn't her, it was her husband Mark saw my work and said, okay, you gotta pick this woman. So, and that's
and I see gallerists at the big show at Lawndale, and I see them taking notes, and pretty soon one or two of those people end up in like a summer group show or something that's sort of toe in the water kind of thing. So that, if that is continuing, that's a really good way to. There used to be a sort of biennial that rotated between Dallas, Fort Worth, and Houston, and maybe Austin. Now there's a triennial coming up, but that's, again, where there's a curator or a curatorial team, and they make the selections. They make studio visits, and then they make the selection for who's in the triennial. And it's normally now just in one place. It's in Austin. They tried for a while having it in Austin with other shows, other places, and it didn't work. And then they had it in San Antonio, and I think the last one was headquartered in San Antonio. So I'm not sure. The new one has been funded, so I know it's going to happen, I think, next year. And I don't know what their source material will be for making studio visits or which curators they're going to select to do it. But that, I've always said that's a great way to at least get a resume going. Because if all it is your graduate exhibition and then some local kind of small thing, people don't pay much attention. But if it has one of those larger caveats for sort of verifying that you are in fact someone to be looked at.
Well, you've been curator and director of the Galveston Arts Center, and a lot of gallerists come down from Houston to Galveston to look and see what you've spotted.
They did.
And people have been picked right out of your shows.
That's true. That's true.
So it's just important to get seen as much as possible.
Right.
And
I've juried a lot of competitions, and from that process, I have, if I'm doing a group exhibition and it has a theme, quite often I said, oh, remember, I saw this work, and I'll go back and look through my records, and I'll say, that's perfect. I'll put that person in this show about animals, or this show about trees, or whatever the thematic theme may be. But that's another good reason to do those kinds of juried competitions, because the juror often does have a connection with an institution or with a gallery, and they may say, I need to keep my eye on this person.
Yeah, that's exactly it, because a lot of these shows have beautiful catalogs.
Exactly.
And you're not paying anything, and you're getting free advertising.
And that's the same with that New American Painting.
New American Painter. Yeah.
But New American Painting, rarely do I see something I don't like. And sometimes it's not only in the region that would be logical for me. So if it could be a gallery in California that gets New American Painting and looks at what's happening in Texas and says, well, I'd really like to show that work.
Yeah. I think that's something that, like you say, is not talked about to students.
No.
That it is a long, hard slog.
It is. It is. And odds are against you. Unfortunately, odds are against you. Now, I know that in Houston in particular, I think a lot of dealers go to, especially the MFA exhibition at the Blackford Gallery, to see what U of H students are doing because they're readily available. They don't often go to the student show because it's a massive, big show and it's pretty hard to navigate. And sometimes they'll have open studios when that's going on. Places like the Burmack building, which houses some 20 artists, will have an open house. When the core program was temporarily there before the new Glass Cell building opened, their studios were there. And I know a lot of dealers would go and look and see who was there. So now there are those kinds of opportunities as well. And you know, if you do an exhibition and you get picked and you're on glass tire, a lot of people are going to pay attention to it, but that's only if you have the exhibition. They don't often cover student exhibitions, but they sometimes do. Yeah. So, you know, and then there's always the possibility of a cooperative situation. There are a handful of cooperative galleries. You have to work at getting into the co-op, but once you're there, you have to spend time. You gallery sit once a week or on a given time frame. There are also galleries that don't have stables of artists they represent. They do one-time exhibitions, and your chances of getting something there are much better. Places like G-Spot and Redbud in Houston do rotating shows, and they do repeat occasionally, but in between they don't have the material there. They don't have to insure it and cover it and store it and do all those things. That's another thing, that if you get accepted into a gallery, I'm not sure anybody ever tells you that most galleries take a 50% commission.
Yes. And
if you're selling things from your studio, you have to realize that if you're asking $500 in your studio, you're going to have to ask $500 in the gallery, and then the gallery is going to take half of that. And there's a reason for that. They have a very high overhead. Their rents in Houston and Dallas and Austin and San Antonio are very high. They have to pay salaries. They have to pay all the utilities. They have to cover your art with insurance. In most cases, there are some very generous galleries that will pay for framing of prints, drawings, and photographs. But most galleries expect the art to be delivered to them the way it's to be presented. Because, and I ran into this many times when I was a dealer, we would pay for frames for an artist, and then 4 years later, the artist would leave to go to another gallery, and it's pretty hard to say, well, you can go, but we have to unframe everything, and then what do you do with the frames? Or you'll have to reimburse us for the frames that we put on this work. because when they price things, usually they add on the frame cost to the price of the work. There's work hanging right behind me here that came in framed with the artist. So whatever price is put on it, the artist gets 50% of that. But if the gallery had to frame it and the artist wants X amount, then they have to add on the equivalent of what the frame will cost, because the gallery is going to recoup that $100 or $150 by tacking that on to the value there. So it gets to be one of these things where you really have to think about why you're pricing things the way they are, know what the competition is. So if you're doing something that's this big and it's an edition of one, it's a unique piece, that's priced a lot differently than if you're doing a print and it's an edition of 50, or maybe a print that's this big costs more than a print that's that big, because in most cases in the art world, it is based on size. It's based on number. If you're editioning something like this Luis Jimenez behind me was an edition of 3, and this is the last one. So it's going to be more expensive than the first 2. And there are reasons for that. So there's all those factors that play in that galleries will help the artist with. I'm not saying that you just have to come with all this in hand and say, this is this, is this, is this, but you need to know those things when you're dealing with a gallery and say, okay, my things, I can't afford to frame them. Can you afford to frame them?
Yes.
And if so, here's the kind of frame I want. Because if they frame it, they don't always have to frame it the way. If you want a gold leaf frame, the gallery is probably not going to go for that unless you're willing to pay for it up front.
Well, with me, I walk in with it framed.
Sure.
I eat the cost for
Exactly.
that.
But you get back.
I get it back when it's sold.
But you can tack that extra
You know
onto
what?
the price.
As an artist, I think it's part of the presentation.
Absolutely, I agree too. I do too.
But I let Anya make the call on what kind of frame she wants, because she knows what will sell.
Exactly, or what she thinks her clients want.
Yes.
Now, some galleries are willing to say, if you want it but you don't want it in this frame, we're happy to. We have a framer you can work with, and we'll get a different frame put on it, but the charge might be slightly different.
Yeah.
And most of them will work that way.
Yeah. Sometimes if they buy it loose, I have like old beat up frames. I'll stick it in there as a delivery frame and just, I don't have to store it anymore.
Exactly.
And so anything you can do to make the customer's job easier is what you have to do as an artist. It's a product.
It is a product, and you know, gallerists are very aware of that. You can kind of tell when you're talking to somebody what it is that they're holding back, what it is that might turn that corner, and you say, well, we'd be happy to reframe this in a frame that you'd be happy with. Because some people, you know, the days of those wonderful, ugly, 3-color mats in a big frame, and the artwork is this big and the mats are that big and they're different colors, that's over. And I think only frame shops now will try to sell those because that's how they make their money. But most artists want it clean and crisp, and they want it about the art and not about the artifice. So I think that's one thing that I've noticed over these past 40 years that has been a big change, that it's much simpler now, and art is made, although art has gotten bigger and bigger and bigger, especially in the painting world, and to some extent in the sculpture world. And then there are other things that have to be worked out with a gallery, which is, if you get a commission, how do you work that with the gallery? There are some galleries that I will not name, but there are some galleries that actually expect 50% if the artist gets a commission on their own, which I've always thought was not right. If the artist did all the work to get the commission, they might, as a courtesy, give the gallery 10% or 20%. If the gallery's having to do a lot of internal work dealing with that commission, if they're having to deal with lawyers or deal with installations that are going to be very expensive, then that becomes a factor in how they deal with the commission. But for most galleries, they'd rather the artists deal with it themselves, because it becomes a daily thing in some cases. In some commissions, if the commission is from a client of the gallery, then I think it should be directly with the gallery, and the gallery should take 50%. But if it's with an outside source like the Houston Arts Alliance, or a consultant that's doing a major commission for some client, then I think it becomes a different process. And all these things need to be worked out as they occur, or before they occur, so that it's very clear, very, very clear in both the artist's mind and the gallery's mind, whose responsibility is what. Mm-hmm. And you need to have that kind of relationship with your gallery. And most galleries do not do contracts anymore. There's just a sort of gentleman's agreement. Mm-hmm. This is how we work. Some say, if I have to give a discount, that I'll absorb that unless it's a museum, and then we'll split that commission, because most museums expect a fairly large discount, usually 20 to 25%. And if the gallery has to absorb that, then they're not making as much money, and they're not going to try to promote the artist to a museum if they think it's not going to be as advantageous for them.
I think a lot of artists don't understand that you can make the call.
Exactly.
And since I'm older, it's like, get it sold. I need the space.
and it's money in hand.
That's true,
Rather than sitting in their inventory and your inventory, because yours is the same. Even if it's at their place, it's your inventory. And it's your frame, and it's eating up.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
And you can't depreciate it on your taxes.
Yes.
If it's just sitting there.
No, you can't, and it's just, you have to eat the cost of storage.
Yeah.
So in the long run, it's cheaper to get it sold.
Exactly. One more thing I'd add into this. There are certain galleries that want to do catalogs and will do them, but they're rare. There are galleries that will cooperate with an artist and say, okay, we can do this much, but if you'll get a designer to design it, maybe you can absorb that cost, and we'll absorb some of the printing costs, because in most cases you can't sell a catalog from a gallery. You can sell one from a museum, mm-hmm. or from a nonprofit space. But most galleries feel like you have to give them away to have them get out into the world. Some galleries do charge, and if it's a well enough known artist, I mean, if it's David Bates doing a show in Dallas, and he wants to publish a catalog, they will give them to clients who buy the work, they will give them to good clients, but otherwise they'll have them available for sale.
Well, so, I see them as cookies for people who purchase work.
Yeah.
It's like, I really appreciate you for putting your hard-earned cash into me. Yeah. Here's a gift.
Because I know Anya does small catalogs, mm-hmm. that are not the full exhibition, and they usually have a small essay. I've written a couple of essays for her artists. And I think she's judicious about it. She doesn't just hand them out to anybody, but she doesn't sell them either. It's sort of like she has them there. If someone's really interested, here it is, but not everybody just walks in and picks up a catalog and walks out.
Right.
To be thrown in the trash down the street, or
that would be so cost prohibitive.
Exactly. But
no, they're more like cookies for people.
And now with these online productions for catalogs. They've gotten much cheaper, and also they'll do catalogs to order. So they'll charge you a certain amount for the setup, but then from then on, the customer or the gallery orders one for the customer, and it makes it much easier than having a. I can remember in Galveston we would do a catalog and have 1,000, and within 2 years we're looking at 300 that are still there.
Yes.
But if you don't do it, oftentimes you run out because you don't anticipate how popular it's going to be. So there's always that too. But these are all issues, and the same thing with mailers. Many galleries don't do mailers anymore because all of their invitations are by email. So
and Facebook.
And Facebook and Twitter and Flickr and all that stuff I don't do.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's many other things to talk about, but I think we've touched on at least some.
Yeah, it's important stuff for artists to know, and that we weren't really taught.
Exactly. And there aren't books about it. I don't think there's any little manual for, how to be an artist.
And to all artists out there, even if you're in your 30s, you still haven't gotten a gallery, don't worry about it. I was 44 years old.
Exactly. And I think good work wins out.
Yes.
And I think perseverance is important.
I know, and if you really love what you're doing.
Yeah.
And don't quit your day job.
No, that's for sure. There are very few artists that make a living as an artist.
Yeah.
Without teaching, without having a second job, without a third job, being an installer or a delivery person, or working in a gallery or working in a nonprofit, because it isn't easy. And even if you're selling moderately well, very few artists make a living wage. You'd have to sell $60,000 or $70,000 worth of art to live on $30,000 or $35,000 and pay taxes on it.
I know. It's always good to have a second
backup.
job.
Exactly.
Yeah. Anything in your future?
Yeah, when I retired 4 years ago, people would say, well, now what are you doing? And I said, well, when I was a curator, people there's this old adage that says Clint Willour would go to the opening of an envelope. And people would see me well, first of all, people thought because I worked in Galveston, I lived there. I lived in Houston. So I wasn't driving up from Galveston every Friday and Saturday to go to openings. I lived here. I still live here. I live in the same place I lived for 40 years. But I felt like that was my job, because I was a curator. I needed to know what was out there and who was making it and what. And oftentimes it gave me an idea for a group exhibition or an artist I'd been following. All of a sudden I said, wow, this is somebody I should be showing. So I said, I used to do what I thought I had to do. Now I do what I want to do. So I still go to openings, but not all of them. If it's a gallery that's showing an artist I don't know or that I have had some interest in, but not really, if it's a friend, if it's a gallery I go to all the time, I try to be supportive of the gallery, I try to be supportive of the artists. But again, I can pick and choose, and I don't have to be out there everywhere, every day. So that's been a big difference. I still jury competitions. I just went to Beaumont last Friday night to see an exhibition that they had done at the Dishman Art Museum at Lamar University that I juried, of alumni of Lamar University. I've written for the new catalog that's coming out on the University of Houston art collection. I wrote on Luis Jimenez and Manuel, Suzanne Bloom and Ed Hill. The entries for those in that, it's going to be a big, thick book. It's the 50th anniversary of the public art system. And I still serve on panels at the Texas Commission on the Arts. So I'm still around. And I write occasionally for a catalog for a gallery. I do talks with artists at galleries. But I pick and choose what I can and will do.
Oh, sounds like a good retirement.
It's a good retirement. Very good.
Well, thank you again, Clint.
Thank you.